Get her out of the line. This ranch doesn't hire dead weight." The shout ripped across the yard, followed by laughter sharp enough to cut. Linny stood at the end of the hiring line with her hand on the strap of her cloth bag. The dust clung to her dress, but she kept her chin level. "Look at her," another man said. "She'll quit before the sun's up. Just another mouth to feed. She should have stayed home." More laughter. A few heads shook in pity, more in amusement. Tucker, the foreman, stepped out from the barn wearing a grin built for humiliation. He stopped in front of her and let his eyes crawl from her boots to her face. "This ranch needs workers," he said, "not dead weight that eats more than it earns." Linny opened her mouth to speak. A deeper voice cut in. "Let her talk." Tristan Crowell was watching her, and the laughter stopped. Linny had reached Ridge Valley Ranch before sunrise, walking the last mile with legs that felt hollow from hunger. Her boots were cracked from the long road, and the cold morning air had settled into her sleeves. She joined the hiring line because it was the last place hiring within 20 miles. She had no room left to fail. She gripped her cloth bag tighter. The torn corner rubbed against her wrist. It was the last thing her mother made before the sickness took her, the only thing Linny carried when the landlord threw her out. Every stitch felt like a reminder of why she needed this job. The men ahead shifted as Tucker moved closer. Some glanced back at her size, smirking. Others muttered, "Why's she even here?" as if she couldn't hear them. Linny kept her eyes forward. When Tucker reached her, he stopped with his boots planted wide and his clipboard tucked under one arm. "You think you belong on a ranch?" he asked, loud enough to stir more laughter. "Yes, sir," Linny said, though her voice trembled. Before Tucker could speak again, Tristan Crowell stepped forward just enough to change the atmosphere around them. His eyes didn't mock. They simply waited. The line quieted. Tucker raised his voice as if performing. "What work have you done? Sewing? Peeling potatoes? Light chores?" He didn't wait for her answer before adding, "Ranch work breaks stronger backs than yours." Linny held her breath steady. "I've done hauling, cleaning, kitchen shifts, long days. I don't quit." Tucker smirked. Not quitting isn't the same as being useful. He angled his head toward the workers nearby. "She'll last 1 hour. Maybe." A few snickers rose from behind her. Tristan stepped closer, the gravel shifting under his boots. His voice stayed calm. "How far did you walk this morning?" 5 miles. "You faint easy?" "No, sir." "You quit when it hurts?" "No." He studied her for a long second, seeing more than her size or her worn dress. "She's with my crew," he said. Tucker's grin faltered. "Your problem, Crowell." Tristan didn't answer. He simply turned and started walking toward the east fence, expecting her to follow. Linny stepped out of the line, her pulse quickening. Behind her, the whispers changed. Some were surprised, some impressed, some annoyed that she wasn't the joke they expected. She didn't look back. Moving forward felt like the first win she'd had in months. Tristan led her to his crew waiting near a stack of tools. The men turned to look, weighing her quietly. Gus, the older one with the silver beard, tossed her a pair of stiff gloves. "Put those on. Blisters come fast out here." Linny slipped them on and tightened the straps. Tristan pointed toward the slope. "We're clearing the east path. Roots, stones, brush. Watch Gus. Match his pace." Gus showed her the basics. Plant your feet. Short swings. Don't waste strength. He demonstrated once, the blade cutting clean through a tangled root. Linny tried to mimic him. Her first swing bounced off the soil. Her second landed weak. She reset and tried again. This time the blade bit deeper. The crew worked in a steady rhythm. Tools striking earth. Stones rolling. Dust rising. Linny tried to match them, though her arms burned almost immediately. During the first short break, she sat on a low stump and opened her palms. The gloves hadn't saved her from the rubbing. Red marks had already formed. She bit the inside of her cheek. A shadow crossed her boots. Tristan set a small tin of salve and a strip of bandage on the stump beside her. Didn't look at her. Walked away. By midday, the sun turned harsh, flattening every shadow on the hillside. Linny's shoulders throbbed with each swing. Sweat slid down her back, soaking the collar of her dress. Her gloves were already thinning, and the skin underneath stung each time she gripped the handle. Still, she worked. Gus passed behind her and murmured, "Shorter swing. Don't chase the dirt." She adjusted, grateful but determined not to show weakness. A younger worker watched her as if waiting for her collapse. When she split a stubborn root, his eyes widened before he turned away. Her breath came tight but steady. Movement became a rhythm. Lift. Strike. Pull. She counted roots instead of minutes. When the crew paused for water, Tristan handed out canteens. He passed them down the line, saying little. But when he reached Linny, he hesitated just a moment longer, lifting the canteen enough so she didn't have to stretch her aching arms. She drank slowly, grateful for the cool metal against her palm. Before they resumed, Tristan stepped behind her and adjusted the angle of her hoe against the ground. "This way," he said. "Less strain on the shoulder." She lifted the hoe again. She still hurt, but she wasn't quitting. Not today. By afternoon, the crew moved to a new stretch of brush where the ground turned uneven and crowded with thick roots. Tucker appeared out of nowhere, boots kicking dust as he walked toward Tristan's line. His grin was already forming. "Crowell," he called. "If your new girl wants to stay, let's see her earn it." Tristan didn't respond, but the crew slowed enough to listen. Tucker pointed at a stack of heavy cedar posts, each one thick and awkward to carry. 10 of those, moved from here to the far fence. Alone. Gus muttered under his breath. Ridiculous. Linny felt every pair of eyes slide toward her. Her arms still shook from the morning's work. Sweat burned her eyes. But she stepped forward anyway. "I'll do it." Tucker laughed. "She'll drop after the second one." Linny crouched, braced herself, and lifted the first post. The weight slammed into her shoulders, but she steadied her footing and pushed forward. Every step was a fight. By the time she reached the far fence and returned for the second post, her breath was ragged. On the fourth trip, her knees buckled. The post slipped. A hand steadied her elbow firm, brief, unmistakable. Tristan didn't look at her. He just said, "Breathe." Then he stepped back, letting her finish the work on her own. The cedar post lay across her arms like a test she had been preparing for her whole life. Linny forced her feet to move, inch by inch, toward the far fence. The crew watched with a quiet intensity now, no longer amused. Even the younger worker who had mocked her earlier stood still, jaw tight. Gus walked alongside her for a few steps, not helping, just making sure she didn't fall wrong. "Short breaths," he murmured. "Keep them steady." Linny nodded, sweat dripping from her chin. When she reached the fence and let the post drop into place, her legs nearly gave out. She bent over, hands on her knees. "Take a moment," Gus said. But Linny shook her head. How many left? 6, he answered. She straightened. Pain thundered up her spine. Her shoulders burned like fire. But she walked back toward the pile again, keeping her steps even. On her 7th post, something loosened in the crew. The younger worker stepped aside respectfully. Another man muttered, "She's tougher than half of us." Tucker's grin had faded into something tight and sour. When she finished the last post, Linny swayed. Tristan stepped forward, offering a canteen without a word. She drank, the cool water cutting through the heat. "This work," he said quietly, "keeps us." It was the closest thing to praise she had ever earned. As the sun dipped lower, the crew gathered near the tool shed for a short break. Linny sat on an overturned bucket, wiping dust from her arms. Her body trembled from exhaustion, but her chest felt strangely light. She had finished every post. Not quickly, not gracefully, but she had finished. Nathan Briggs, the ranch owner's son, walked up with perfect timing, shirt clean and boots polished. He flashed a practiced smile. "You know," he said, folding his arms, "you don't have to break yourself out here. House needs cleaning. Kitchen needs hands. I can put in a good word." The offer was easy, comfortable, safe, and everyone knew it. Linny met his eyes. "Thank you, but no." Nathan raised an eyebrow. "No? I came to work," she said. "Real work." A few crew members exchanged glances, surprised, impressed. Gus hid a grin under his beard. Nathan shrugged, clearly annoyed. "Suit yourself." He turned and walked off, boots crunching sharp in the dirt. Tristan approached soon after, checking the angle of the shadows. "We're finishing at the ridge," he said to the crew. Then, quietly, to Linny, "Strong choice." She didn't know if he meant the work or the refusal, but either way, her heart steadied. The ridge was cooler, with long strips of shadow stretched across the ground. The work here was lighter, clearing thistles, moving smaller stones, but Linny's muscles had begun to stiffen, and every motion reminded her of the cedar posts. As she knelt to pull a stubborn weed, a sudden wave of dizziness washed over her. She steadied herself with one hand on the dirt. A breeze carried the faint smell of smoke from the crew's earlier fire pit, and something inside her shifted. Her mother standing over a small stove, stirring a pot of soup on nights when there wasn't enough for both of them. The smell of wood smoke settling into their clothes. The softness of her mother's voice. "You always finish what you start, Linny girl." The memory passed like a quick shadow. Linny blinked hard and kept pulling. Tristan walked the ridgeline, checking progress. When he reached her, he crouched beside a stone she had been struggling with. He said nothing, just wedged his boot against the ground and nudged the stone enough to break its hold. She cleared it easily after that. No praise, no comment. Just a small, silent act that made the impossible manageable. When he stood, Linny breathed easier. Even with the pain in her arms, she felt steadier, as if the ridge itself had shifted under her feet. The next morning arrived with sharp cold air and a pale sunrise stretching across the ranch. Linny stepped out of the bunkhouse early, feeling the stiffness in her shoulders but refusing to let it slow her. She walked toward the meeting shed where the crew gathered each dawn. Tristan was already there, tightening the straps of a worn saddle. He glanced at her, eyes steady. "Long day ahead," he said. "You ready?" "Yes," Linny answered. Gus joined them, carrying coils of wire. "We're clearing the west pasture. Tangles everywhere." The crew set off across the field. Frost still clung to the grass, crunching under their boots. Lenny worked beside the men, cutting old wire, pulling stakes, rolling heavy tangles. It was steady work, easier than cedar posts, but still demanding. Halfway through the morning, she cut her palm on a hidden barb. Blood welled quickly. Gus hissed, "Wrap it." Before she could reach for cloth, Tristan was already there. He pulled a clean strip from his vest pocket and pressed it into her hand. "Use this," he said. Simple. Direct. Their fingers brushed for half a second, enough to steady her breath. She wrapped the cut, tightened the knot, and kept going. Tristan watched for a moment longer than usual. Then he turned back to the fence. By noon, clouds gathered thick over the hills, bringing a restless wind. The crew loaded tools into the wagon and moved toward the lower creek bed to reinforce a sagging line of posts before the weather turned. The ground near the creek was soft, almost slick. Lenny braced each post with her hip while hammering new stakes. Sweat mixed with dust on her neck. A harsh shout cut through the air. "Tucker." He strode toward them, boots splashing in the shallow mud. "Crowell!" he barked. "Owner's son is riding through. Make things look clean." Tristan didn't stop working. "We're already on schedule." Tucker scoffed. "Doesn't look like it, especially with her slowing things down." Lenny kept her eyes on the post, refusing to react. Tristan stepped between them, calm but sharp. "She keeps pace with my crew. That's all that matters." Tucker laughed. "Right. The charity case." Lenny's jaw tightened, but she kept hammering. Nathan Briggs soon arrived on horseback, his coat pressed and neat. He surveyed the field, clearly bored. "Looks fine to me," he said, and rode on. Tucker stared after him, annoyed he had lost his moment. He stormed off without another word. Gus leaned toward Lenny. "You handled that." She didn't answer, but her chest felt warm with the quiet victory. The storm broke in the late afternoon. Rain swept across the ranch in heavy sheets, soaking the ground and turning the creek path into sticky mud. The crew pushed through it, setting braces and tightening the last wires. Lenny felt her clothes plastered to her skin, every movement heavier than the one before. She slipped once, catching herself on a low branch. Mud splashed up her legs. Tristan saw it. He didn't rush to her or scold her. He simply stepped closer, taking the next section of line so she had a few seconds to breathe. When she caught up, he looked at her once. "Steady," he said. She nodded. "Steady." As they finished the final post, a memory surfaced unbidden, a tiny one, but deep. Her mother placing warm bread into her hands after a long, cold day, saying softly, "Rest a minute, then you keep going." By evening, the storm eased. The crew returned to the yard, mud dripping from their boots. Tucker stood near the barn, arms crossed, waiting like a man prepared to pounce. "Briggs wants a word," he said. Lenny's stomach tightened, but she stepped forward. Tristan moved beside her. Not in front. Beside. She felt stronger just knowing he was there. Thomas Briggs, the ranch owner, waited inside the barn office. Nathan stood behind him, looking restless. Tucker hovered near the door, smirking. Thomas cleared his throat. "Miss Hale," he said. "We've been reviewing the crew's output over the last 2 days." Lenny's heart thudded. Had she done enough? Had she pushed hard enough? Thomas continued, "Your numbers are impressive. Higher than some of the men, frankly." Tucker stepped forward. "Sir, she's still not fit for this." "Enough," Thomas said, raising a hand. Work speaks, and her work is clear. Linny exhaled slowly. Thomas nodded once. You stay. Full pay. Same as the others. Tucker's face tightened. Nathan looked mildly confused. But Linny felt something open inside her, a release she hadn't expected. Outside, the crew waited. When she stepped out, Gus slapped her shoulder lightly. Told you, he said. You got grit. Tristan lingered behind him. When the others drifted off, he walked toward her, steps measured. You earned this, he said quietly. Linny swallowed. I wasn't sure I could. He shook his head. You didn't break. You rose. A pause. Soft. Real. He held out his coat. Cold tonight. She accepted it. Their fingers touched. Warm. They walked toward the ridge together, unhurried. Not as worker and boss, but as two people choosing the same path.